I'm joined with the incredible Alexis Sanders for a one-on-one discussion about scaling ranking data analysis and how to organize, visualize, and communicate it whilst having some fun with some SEMrush data. I'm really excited to get into it. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Pittsburgh today from my apartment. So if you can hear my neighbors singing their heart out, sorry about that.
That's all right.
So they're pretty good though. So, you know, if you sign up for a webinar, you got a webinar and a show. So pretty fun there.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm screen sharing today, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see how this goes. Okay.
Yeah. Let's just jump into it.
Let's jump into it. Okay. So this presentation was born out of the idea that we could have fun with SEMrush data, that at all times we don't really have access to first-party data like GSC or GA. And so we kind of have to use other sources like SEMrush, like Ahrefs, like advanced web ranking or anything along those lines. And it can be really challenging to deal with at scale because you have a lot of data. Typically, you'll have to go through and categorize all that, maybe in something like a software like Excel, and that can be a pain. So that's what today's presentation is about.
Awesome.
Can you guys see everything?
Yeah, we can see everything. Yeah.
All right, perfect. If you want a copy and you don't want to sit and wait for us to go through for the first 20 minutes, feel free to follow this bit.ly link at dealing with ranking data. Otherwise, thanks for joining.
Yeah,
right,
that goes to a GitHub link, and yeah, it's pretty much everything that's here is there. It's awesome.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if you want to see any of the files or anything that I'm referencing today, all the information is there. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter as well. But okay, so what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to start off by getting some SEMrush ranking data. We're going to use Jupyter Notebooks as our categorization tool, but you could also do this in something like Google Colab if you would like to not have to download Jupyter Notebook, which is totally fine. Load the data into Power BI, which you could also use another tool here like Tableau to visualize the data, and then we're just going to visualize it. So yeah, I mentioned before that we're doing this because, you know, sometimes we don't always have first-party data, so third-party data is better than no data at all. We want to have insights above just a lump of metrics that really mean nothing. And we want to be more efficient in our work so we don't have to, you know, do all these mundane tasks and we can have fun. All right, so the first thing, if you've never used SEMrush before, here is a GIF of me going through and pulling the organic research report, but you all know how to do that, so that's probably gonna be super easy, so we can check that off of our list. Then we're going to go into Jupyter Notebooks. This is where what we're going to be using is a notebook, which is basically based off of Python. If you ever want to go through, I definitely recommend using something like Anaconda, which is a package installer that can help you, if you've never used Jupyter Notebooks before, to download everything that you would need to get started. And pretty much, as you can see me going through here, it's just me opening a new notebook. All right, so from there, what we're going to have to do is import useful libraries. And for today, really the only library that's super important that we need to have is pandas. Other than that, as you'll see, this is me at like 7 times speed. I'm pretty slow at typing. If you want to find out how fast you are, you can go to like typeracer.com, but I'm pretty slow. But I also imported a convenience library from IPython that is going to help us to export things a little bit faster. All right, so everything worked there, everything imported, and we figured that out by just clicking the run button. And so here, what I'm doing is importing the data that we need. So we need a way to get all the data that's in probably a CSV file that you pulled from SEMrush into Jupyter Notebook so that we can do some processing on it. And as like a side tip, if you could put everything in the same folder, it's usually easier because otherwise, as you can see when I do this, read CSV dots and then quote mark, you have to then, if you don't have it in the same folder, you're going to have to add the folder structure in there and that can get confusing really quick. So definitely give that a go. And then we're going to set up basically a bunch of if-else statements. And the purpose of these if-else statements is to categorize the data. So if you're used to using Excel to categorize your keyword data, you can think of it as basically using a filter and just boldly clicking down and saying like everything that has a word in it, this is going to be the category. So for example here, what we're saying is if Chipotle is in the keyword, we're going to put it in the brand bucket. If otherwise, we're just going to put it as non-brand immediately. So what we have to do from there, beyond just creating a method, which is what's going to actually be doing a lot of the work, we're going to be creating a Lambda function. And if you're not familiar with Lambda functions or Lambda calculus, fun stuff, what we're going to be doing here is, you can see we're creating a new brand column. Then what we're going to do is create a new, the brand column is going to be the new column that we're creating. And as you can see through the process, that the brand column is new and is created, which is awesome. And then from there, we're going to use the keyword column that already comes with SEMrush data and basically use that to categorize. And what the Lambda function does is it goes row by row through the data and applies our function to that data. So it goes and says, hey, is the keyword in column 0, is that brand? So in this case, it's Chipotle. So Chipotle would be categorized as brand. And then as it goes down, it would categorize things as non-brand. So basically, we save a little bit of time here. But where it's really useful is for things that may be a little bit more complicated. So for example, using Serpent Tents and sorting things as a proxy to figure out when is this information populating. So Serpent Tents are something that SERP features are something that come built in with SEMrush data. And for that, what you can do is make a logic decision of, okay, what do I want to, when I see shopping ads, maybe that signals to me that this SERP has a more buying intent or transactional intent, and you can really use whatever verbiage you want. When it has a local pack, maybe they want to go somewhere, maybe you just want to call it local. In this instance, you can see called my different categories for Serpent Tents: buy, go, learn, get a job, and navigational, and then everything else I just called other. Because for Chipotle, which I used as my example, you really don't have to, they probably don't care about flights at Chipotle. I mean, I can't say for sure, but they probably don't. And you can make this anyway. Like maybe somebody disagrees here and says like, hey, videos, I don't think when videos appear, it's really navigational. Then you can just sort that into other or whatever you want to do. It's completely flexible here. So what we're going to do here is use the base that we had for brand to then make a new function that allows us to search Serpent N. And it's basically the same thing. All it does is requires a little bit of reverse engineering here, which should be pretty great. And we're going to call it SERP feature. We're going to use the keyword again. Oh, actually, we're going to use a Serpent N. Sorry about that. And then we're going to apply it to every single SERP feature. The one thing to consider here, though, is you almost have to have hierarchical knowledge, because what the if-else function in Python is going to do is it's going to pick out the first category. So for us, if there is an ad in the SERP or an ad in that SERP feature cell, it's going to automatically characterize it towards that category, which for us is buy. And then from there, it's going to jump out of the function and then go on to the next one. Okay, so you can see here pretty much it's just me going through and saying like, if in this featured snippet section, if it says shopping, then put it in buy. If it says AdWords, put it in buy. And then there's almost like an implicit logic built in there. And it just continues on with me going through and typing it. But it's on the document that's in the GitHub. So if you guys want to see any of it, definitely check that out. Okay, then we're just gonna kind of like jump ahead here. Some more function creations. As I mentioned before, everything's on GitHub, so you can see all of it there. I also decided to add a few additional categories. One is what type of informational category it was. So if in the keyword it had any of these queries that were like near me, take out, I wanted to dive in and look at that data a little bit more deeply, because although I don't work for Chipotle, I thought these would be things that would be really relevant towards their brand and things that I might want to look at and things that would separate the users out. And this, of course, can be modified, can be flexible. And the really good thing about Python is, let's say we don't think about something, or we run the data and we see that it's not exactly what we anticipated. Creating one of these categories only takes a few seconds. So it's really easy to go back and modify. I also used one for products because I was really interested in how many people look up bowls, burritos, taco, quesadilla, and salads. And we'll look at a little bit of that data later. And then I also did meats too, because I thought it would be fun. So here's like a fun trivia question for everyone. Out of these meats that appear here, what do you think has the highest search volume? And this includes all brand and non-brand for Chipotle, in terms of the traffic that the Chipotle gets that's estimated by SEMrush. It's a lot of assumptions there, but. I can't see the chat, Nick. Does anyone have any thoughts? Any guesses?
What sorts the meats?
Yeah, so one of the sorts I used was meats, but what do you think is like the most popular Chipotle meat that appears?
Oh,
like,
golly.
time-wise? Yeah.
I'm gonna just think chicken. I mean, people can
Chicken.
identify chicken pretty easily.
Right. And then actually, interestingly enough, if you look at the bowls section, it turns out to be like similar to that, but it's actually sofritas. A lot of people want to know what sofritas is. So we'll come back to it later. But this is kind of interesting. So the metric I used here and the metric I use for pretty much the rest of the slides is SEMrush's organic estimated traffic. It just shows up as traffic, and it's kind of a nice proxy metric that uses the current ranking and search volume to kind of guess at what traffic a website would be getting. It's not perfect. I know there's some articles about there that compare actual metrics versus something like this, but like I mentioned before, when you only have third-party data, it can be kind of hard. But anyways, and then the last thing we need to do here after we go through all of our categories is take all that sorting and all that data and export it into another CSV file. And what that does is allows us to then take the data and work with it. Because as we work with it in the notebook, it's changing, but it's not changing anywhere permanently. So if we mess up, we can always just go through and rerun it, but we really want to make sure that we have something to work with. So this is where my convenient function comes in, and it just helps to get links going. So this is me at like 2 speeds, so you can see how slow typing I am, but it's kind of fun stuff. So all I do here is type that file into the file link object as a parameter. And then once I run that, it gives me something that I can download, which is just a little cool side thing if you're trying to like work interactively with your data. And that actually, interestingly enough, will download the file instead of pulling up the actual file that you have in the folder. But, it makes things a little bit easier. So from there, it's all about going back to Excel or Google Sheets, any type of spreadsheet tool, and making sure that everything aligns with your thoughts. So one thing that you may notice here is that almost all the Chipotles were categorized in the chip category, which what I did was I just ended up cutting out chips. I was like, nobody's going to get chips and salsa today. And that was the solution there. But it might, if I had just pulled this data into a business intelligence tool with that, the chip category would have been out of control. It would have been like, man, we're ranking for all the chips, every chip. And we didn't really want that. So it's really important to make sure that as you're going through, you're checking to make sure that your logic makes sense and that your proof, your mathematical calculations that you went through in creating your program makes sense. So cleaning your data. From there, we're going to go into Power BI, load the data, which if you've never used Power BI, I would definitely check out Will Reynolds' Sears videos on YouTube. He has 2 really great series where he comes and just tells you everything that you need to know about the basics of loading data and whatnot. But essentially what loading the data is, you just pull all the information in, it goes out, it gets it. Then in the field section, you can see there, it just populated. And now we can go in and build some different visualizations. And from there, it's pretty much about just playing with the data and kind of seeing like what works, what doesn't work. There's some like classics. I know that in data visualization, the bar graph is like maybe the least exciting, but it is one of the more classic ones. A favorite of Power BI is the tree map. So you can see here, like what are the top subdomains. And in the next slide, I have a visual of this broken out by brand and non-brand keywords. We can use the style tab to make it look a little bit nicer than we did before. And in this case, we can see that www is primarily driving most of the traffic, and almost all the traffic is that's estimated, of course, is brand. So that like green little slivers, all the non-brand stuff, which could be fun to dive in a little bit later, but it's nice to get that like heuristic start. What are the top Serpent Tents? So those are things like that we had built out before, that logic. And not surprisingly to probably anyone here, it is like going to Chipotle. If you're looking at Chipotle, most people are interested in going there, but they did have a lot of information about learning, and about buying. And a lot of the learn category ended up being things like nutrition and finding out how many calories were in your burrito. We can also do things like segment that data by non-brand. So maybe we're like, all right, well, here we can see that brand is showing up and it's really strong and it's really powerful, but like, that little tiny bit of green really doesn't tell us anything. So we can expand that out and filter by a slider or some sort of filter that will allow us to get to that data. We can check out from our segment that we created top Serpent Tents. So this is the thing that I showed you guys in like the blue kind of honeycomb type thing. So obviously most of it ends up being local, but there's a lot of questions about the menu, a lot of questions about nutrition, as well as delivery. For this chart, this ended up getting like a little bit meta, but basically it's the intent that I had created on the y-axis. So like local, menu, nutrition, overlaid with SERP features. So thinking back, maybe I should have, instead of doing Serpent Tent, making like a sort of proxy metric, maybe I should have just called it what I thought were the most important. So it was a little bit easier, but you can see with local based keywords, there's a local pack that's going to be appearing because local pack is what triggers the go category. For menu, there's actually a lot of ads that are appearing, which is kind of interesting to think about. Nutrition, like not a knowledge graphs that are appearing. So you can go back in and get some insights there. And a lot of this can end up being a little bit intuitive, but sometimes it's nice to have that intuition with some data to support your assumptions there. Okay. So the top products by meat, maybe you want to look at your data by 2 segments. Tree maps are kind of like the classic way to look at it for that. And a lot of what you can see here is just like clicking in the fields, clicking on different charts and visualizations and trying to see like what works and what doesn't work. And you can see as I'm going through, I'm filtering out any queries that didn't have any sort of meat. So any sort of other information there, because it wasn't really all that useful. And it turns out, as you mentioned before, Nick, that chicken seems like a easy win. And it turns out for non-brand, for brand, it ends up being bowl. If you were to look at this data with non-brand, chicken burritos are really big. So it's almost like kind of shows you the power of like the chicken burrito bowl from Chipotle, that it has so much more search volume when you look at it in terms of brand. But kind of interesting side note there.
Yeah.
Me once again commenting that maybe people don't really know what sofrita is. Sofritas is, which actually we'll see a little bit later. There's the most popular question is, what is sofritas?
I was about to say, I was imagining that would pop up.
Yes, yeah, no, it totally does. Yeah. There are other things that you can do like with the data that you have besides just using SERP traffic. You can use also the paid data, which it can end up being really interesting, and you can create some interesting visualizations there. You can look at like top visualization for features, which is pretty cool. So this is actually a chart about like I made like another section about the top lifestyle features for Chipotle. So like gluten-free or like their new lifestyle bowls, which are kind of a newer thing. But gluten-free was the top feature. So kind of cool to think about that. Top questions. So I know a lot of people in search with knowledge and with knowledge graphs and whatnot, we're really interested in informational queries. And these are something that can be really easy for us to pick up because it's where a user has a need and we want to generally meet our users' needs. So, as we mentioned before, the top category is what is sofritas? And how many calories in a burrito bowl? A lot is the answer. But if you actually were wondering that, they have a nutrition calculator where you can go through and like calculate what your burrito is. Mine's like 1,280 calories or something. I'm not even joking. Like it's, as soon as I saw that, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to split this into 2 meals. It's fun.
It's scary when you find out the real facts.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Lie to me. Ignorance is bliss. Maybe the advice here, the moral of this webinar is don't check how many calories are in your Chipotle burrito.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mentioned before, you can look at different things by different metrics. So here I pulled in SEMrush's paid estimates and organic estimates. So looking at like the top traffic by cost, and I added a slider that allowed me to filter the information a little bit more. So there's a lot of different things you can do. All the files are available to you guys. So I definitely encourage you to go out there and play with stuff and have fun and see what insights you can gain, because, I hope as you were watching this, you kind of saw how interactive and fun it was, and how, we can think of data as this laborious process of us having to go through and filter, but there are mechanisms and there are templates that we can really easily reverse engineer and make it something pretty easy. So definitely check out the stuff there. So that has
awesome.
us 20 minutes. Yeah, that was like oddly perfect timing.
No,
I never
awesome.
hit time.
Oh, I really appreciate that, and I definitely encourage anyone that is curious to go to that, to check out that link. I'll just admit right now, like, Python isn't something that I know, and Chipotle is also something I've never tried.
Do they not have Chipotles in Australia?
No, unfortunately, but we do. Yeah, I know. We just got a Taco Bell, so there you go.
It's not the same. And Cordoba is not the same as Chipotle. Sorry, Cordoba's on this call.
But for novices like myself, to Python, like, if we do go to that link, is that something that we can sort of template out for like our own data sets?
100%. Yeah. I
Awesome.
think the thing that I really wanted to show here is that, and the reason why all the files are available to everyone on the call, is that you'll look at it and you'll be able to get a sense of what's going on just based on the language. So Python is a fairly abstract language. It's actually based on C, which is kind of cool. And C is kind of thought as more of a strongly typed, more like intense programming language. But you should be able to read it and kind of see what's going on. And I think if you have any questions, definitely reach out. But it's much easier to reverse engineer Python than it is to like write and create your own Python.
Yeah.
I find that out the hard way. But if you have somebody else's work already done, then it's really easy to go back and reverse engineer. So
that's great, because like, if I were to tackle like if else statements or Lambda functions, like having never really done that kind of programmatic language before or seen it, I wouldn't honestly know what I was looking at, and to know like how to manipulate that. So that's really, really awesome. How much time would you
I would encourage you to go look at Google Colabs, because it requires no installation, and because it's the same notebook type style, it allows you to play around with things and kind of see what's working. The coolest thing about notebooks in general is that you can do some code, click run, and then see if it works. And if it doesn't, then you just try something else. And Colabs is great because you don't have any installation type stuff that's involved with it. Whereas like with Jupyter Notebooks, you kind of have to go to either install it yourself or use a package manager like Anaconda.
Okay, great. I'm just kind of thinking like business case. So like for an agency or for an in-house team, like, looking at how are we going to look at our data and understand it in a more fundamental kind of way? Like, how much time would you allocate to organize the data in this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you know the mechanics of how it works, it probably would take like maybe an hour max to modify the document, the notebook itself. I think the thing that would take longer would be figuring out what categories are actually meaningful. So for instance, like there's many ways you could slice the cake, basically. We could look at a totally different thing for Chipotle with the keyword data that's in SEMrush. So I think that would probably take the longest. You have to kind of figure out what you want to see. And then this is kind of enables one to make that process of like getting that data faster than they usually would. And that then enables you to iterate faster, because if you can get all that data quickly, then you can say like, oh, wait, no, that's not what I wanted. And then because you're not repeating yourself multiple times, you have that like more freedom to do stuff, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know that I like with Excel would sometimes like go back and like be like, yeah, that categorization is great enough. It's good. It's good enough. It took like 2 days. It's fine. It's fine. Nobody says the categorization. But now it's like, oh, like, can you modify this? Like, can we see this way? So
yeah. Because once someone like has like more visibility over the full gamut of it, they of course want to enhance and like understand things a little bit more granular. But just on that, like, a lot of the times, businesses that like they're dynamic, they'll have like products that are added, deleted, or maybe not deleted, but just discontinued. Like, how do you sort of use this data with more dynamic sites?
Yeah,
because I'm assuming this is static.
Yeah, so like the program you create would be static, but let's say, for instance, in your example, Nick, you mentioned like a discontinued product. And let's say Chipotle gives up on sofritas. They're like, we don't serve tofu anymore. It's not a real meat. It's only a substitute, which I know it's real and tofu's great. But let's say, just for the sake of this example, that they decide to get rid of it. All we have to do is like modify our code once, and then that we don't have to change anything else in terms of like our keyword categorization. And this method too doesn't just have to be SEMrush data. Like you could put any CSV data. You can use any sort of like pull out information that you want to pull out from it. So like theoretically, you could scale it in different ways, but the exact example was SEMrush. So it might be easier to work with if you're working with SEMrush.
Yeah, but, awesome.
Yeah, have fun with it. Like do cool things,
Right. We do have a question from the chat. Do we have like something like this by importing SEMrush data into like using Google Data Studio, for instance, like in creating like calculated fields, being able to like use those case statements with Data Studio? Yeah,
definitely. I'm like a huge fan of Data Studio because I'm lazy. No, I'm not really lazy, but I'm all into efficiencies. No, seriously. So yeah, like if you wanted to create a report that pulled in information from a source like SEMrush, you'd first have to be tracking keywords in SEMrush, because I don't think you can just pull in the organic ranking data. And if SEMrush people tell me if I'm wrong, because I hope that I'm wrong here, but you'd have to be tracking keywords. And then you could probably set up filters to filter that data in the way that you would want. I think that could work, and that could be something that you have like on an ongoing basis. But there's a few things you'd probably have to figure out in there. So you would be limited in terms of flexibility from the data. First of all, because you're not getting all the organic ranking data. And then secondly, you would then have to like go through and do the categorizations, which I think would be fine. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
awesome. And of course, I might just have one last question. The example that you used was Chipotle. Chipotle is like a huge enterprise restaurant chain in America, but can we use this also for maybe more niche businesses that maybe have like lower search volume, or maybe have just like a little bit more nuance to their search?
Yeah, definitely. I just picked Chipotle because they're not one of our clients, and I was like Chipotle, so it's kind of like that fun connection, and I go there like 7 times a week. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you can use it with any type of data, probably. Like you can just, if you are using SEMrush and you are able to pull your domain from SEMrush, you can probably use those templates and modify them so that they're pulling out the keywords that you want them to pull out. You can definitely off the bat use the function for the SERP proxy, because that doesn't really require any changes unless you want to change like what it's called. Like if you want to call by transactional, or if it has a shopping ad transaction or something like that, you could modify it. But yeah, you could definitely use it with anything that pulls data from SEMrush for this particular stuff. And then if you wanted to get more creative, you could probably use the method with the logic behind it with anything, probably.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to close up. Again, like if you've got any questions, please tweet out at Alexis. Alexis, where can people find you?
Hey, yeah, thanks so much, Nick. I'm on Twitter at Alexis K. Sanders. So see you guys there.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, use the hashtag 5 hours of SEO.
5 hours. Thanks, Nick. Thanks so much.
No worries. All right. We do have just like 2 more minutes.
Two more minutes.
Yeah, I thought we were going to do a little bit more banter there, so that's all right.
We should totally just do some more banter then. We have to stall. We have to stall till people get here.
Oh, that's all right. It's honestly a real pleasure, and a pleasure for me, because I've been following you ever since I saw you on Experts on the Wire. So please go check out Alexis Sanders. She's incredibly brilliant. She is a senior SEO manager at Merkle.
Thanks so much.
It's a complete honor.